everyone, this is Nikki and I'm back again today with a fun card. We're going to look at layering die cuts and we're going to use this stamp set from Altenew, which is a paint a flower rose and this teeny tiny sentiment of thank you. This would look great watercolored, but I really wanted a bright white card. So I'm going to use Copic markers and I'm going to use these Altenew nesting dies. So these dies are expensive. They are beautiful and great to put sentiments on, that kind of thing, but this is a new way to use it. I learned this from Therese, who is at Lost in Paper, and she has a class on the Altenew Academy that goes over ways to use die cuts. And so this idea is definitely from her. I just want to show you a few tips and tricks on it, but if you want all the details, make sure you go take that class in the Altenew Academy. I will link that class in the description, and I'll also link Teresa's YouTube channel so that you can check her out too. So today what we're going to start with, I'm going to stamp 3 different panels, and I'm using Lawn Fawn's black ink. I like Copic coloring with this ink, so I wanted a more fine line. I feel like it gives you a good fine line. So I'm going to stamp this on 3 different sets. You may not need quite that many, but I like to add things to a card front versus stamping on my card front. So I'll end up having 4 different layers here. Another thing that I think is important on this card is to make sure your black lines from your stamping are the same. So if you stamp one layer with just one move of your MISTI and you stamp another one with 2, it's going to look strange because the black is not going to match up. So not only are we trying to match up our coloring, but we're trying to match up these black lines. So you want them about the same darkness, about the same size. And I don't know if you struggle with this, but sometimes if I put too much pressure on my MISTI, I will get differences in those lines. So just be careful how you're doing it, and then I'll show you what we do with these 3 panels. So with the 3 panels, you want to let the ink dry. Whenever I'm going to Copic color, I try to let it dry. So I'm going to set these 3 panels aside, let them dry for a little while, and then we're going to do some die cutting on them, and I'll show you some tricks on that to make our layered look. So here is part of the tricky part. It's making sure you get everything lined up perfectly. So what we're going to do, and this is a tip from Therese, is to cut 2 layers at a time just to help with our spacing. So I'm going to go ahead and lay out all 3 dies that I'm going to use on this piece of paper. I'm going to make sure everything's level. I'm going to look at the top and the bottom, just make sure everything's spaced appropriately. I also wanted to use a size that the whole image would go off of the paper. So you kind of want part of the image on the back. You want a little bit on each of these die cuts. So when you're looking at your images and trying to decide what to use, it really needs to take up enough space so that this kind of card makes sense. So when I was looking at stamp sets, I was really sizing them up against these dies to make sure they would take up an entire panel. I did cut my panels to 4 by 5.25. That way I had some spaces on the edge because I would like to line this whole panel in black. So it gives you just a little bit of space, and this stamp was the only one that I had that would go across all of the options. So I've got the biggest one taped down because that's going to be the bottom layer. And then this is a trick that Therese said, was to go ahead and cut out this middle one because this is going to be underneath other things. So you're not going to notice that the middle was cut out of this. And that way you can kind of line up your parts. So I did the middle out of the other panel. This is the second panel that has kind of the medium size. And I went on and cut this one out. So we've got several panels here that we're working with. So we have the bottom panel that's going to get glued onto a backing of black, and then we have our biggest of the nesting labels, and I'm just lining them up because I like to make sure that I've cut everything appropriately. So this second layer I'm going to line up. See how the hole is missing right here? That was from cutting out that little bitty one, but it's going to be covered up by this, so just perfect. The little one fits right in the middle, and I'm just eyeballing this to make sure that everything looks like I've spread it out, like I didn't get anything really off, and it worked great. So next what we're going to do is some coloring. I am not going to take you through all the coloring. I'm going to speed it up because the coloring part, I want you to know a few things about it, but it also takes a very long time, and I don't want you to have to watch that forever. So we're gonna start, I really wanted my flowers to be pink. They are roses, and I love like a pink corally color rose. So I'm gonna start with R22. This is going to be the darkest of the colors. So I kind of put my pieces back together right here so that I could start making kind of the same marks on each one. And you got to remember that you don't have to color all of these pieces. Some of them are going to get covered up. So with this big piece right here, I'm going to get the middle colored, and then I'm going to move and I'm going to put my pieces on top of each other and see what actually needs to be colored so I don't waste my time. I'm using R20 as my light color, so R22 is the brighter color, and then R20 is the lighter color on these roses. So I'll pop that up for you. So here you can see I got a little carry away on my roses. Part of this is going to be underneath the other thing. So some of it I did waste the coloring on, and now I'm lining back up to figure out where I actually need to color on this larger of the nesting. So I'm looking at that. I will grab my little piece, look at where I need to color there, but I'm going to start coloring the outside edges so that I've got that taken care of. So this is complicated to me because you need to really be looking at your pieces and figuring out what you want to color, or you could just go uncomplicated and color everything, but coloring takes so long that you hate to waste it on pieces that aren't going to be seen. So I would lay my pieces like this and try to remember to color only the important things, but I will say this coloring probably took me an hour. Wanted to show you the color I used for the green. It's YG61. Of course, that will be in the description. If you hadn't done it yet and you're hanging with me in this video, please make sure you hit the subscribe button. This is very time consuming to create YouTube videos, and every time somebody hits that button, it just makes me do a happy dance. It's so exciting to see that people are wanting to watch. So if you were able to do that, I would appreciate it so much. And know that I've got several other fun videos out there, especially if you're thinking about becoming a YouTuber. I've got a new video about the filming of that and using lighting and what all goes into it, and I'm creating a whole series for that, so I'd love for you to join me on that. I'm going to speed ahead, show you what color I used for the orange flowers, and then we'll put this card together. I'm going to drop all of these colors in the next little bit so that you can see all of them, but they are in the description, just so you know. One tip I would give you is if you have a stamp set that has bigger images than these, it will be much easier to complete this card. These images are so tiny, might be easier to watercolor them so that you didn't have to color each little individual thing, but it really does make a statement, and I really wanted to see that beautiful black outline with these Copic markers. So I hope you enjoy it for all the effort that it took. So for this part, I needed to decide if I was going to do embellishments, if I was going to add a sentiment. I decided that I would use a very small sentiment that can fit right here on this area. But one nice thing that you can do is take your sentiment, kind of move it around, decide what looks the best to you. But I really liked that kind of bottom right corner there. It just fits perfectly, the thank you does. So I'm going to stamp that on there very carefully because I've worked very hard on these panels. So I looked at, I thought about just freehand stamping this, but I was so worried because I have worked so hard on the panels that I didn't want to mess it up. So I decided, even though this is a tiny little sentiment, that I was going to use my MISTI to make sure I got it level. The other thing that I did was hold up the next layer to make sure that I'm not actually accidentally going to cover up this stamping. I highly recommend this because you want to make sure that it looks right with your other layer on there. So I added my second layer to make sure that I could fit the thank you right there. I know I can from looking earlier, but I want to make sure I put it in the exact correct spot. So I did that, and then the nice thing about a MISTI is that it's got the grid lines when you pick up your thank you. So when you pick it up with the top panel of the MISTI, it's got the grid lines there, and you can look along those and know if it's straight as well. Because I've lined everything up level that I'm stamping on, and then picking that up, I can look at the grid lines and make sure that it's level. So you see right here, I do a little adjustment to move myself level along those lines, and that little adjustment makes the difference in how your card looks. So you just want to be, when you're doing something this complicated, you really want to be careful that you've got things level, you've got them lined up appropriately, because on this type of card, that can really mess you up. So I'm using my favorite black ink. This is a really good dark ink, and when you're doing these teeny tiny letters, do not smush on them too hard or you'll make them distorted. So I'm using my Scotch foam tape. The reason I picked this specific foam tape is because it's the thinnest one that I have, and I want this to have dimension, but I don't want the many layers of this card to be so thick that it's difficult to mail. So I'm using this on each layer. So I've got several different layers, and then we're going to line everything up. The downside of using a foam tape versus a glue is that you don't have much movement once you lay the piece down. So I'm going to have to get right over top of it. You may see my head in some of these shots, and really look at my design to make sure I've got it in the correct location. So I got the largest piece. We're going to put this one down. I'm lining up. I'm looking at my black lines. I'm looking at the pattern that this makes. I'm trying to make sure that I've got everything lined up. So what I do is pick one section to work on. So I'm going to work on that top left section and maybe push it down once I feel like it's in the right place, and then slowly line up the rest, because you know you got to be close, and then make sure I press down carefully. So the next layer is also popped up on foam. We're doing the same idea where we're just making sure we've got it lined up. I usually pick a section where I know I have it, go ahead and stick that part just slightly down, and then make sure I've got everything else lined up. If you're going to do this, make sure you take your time on this step, because if you are looking at it from above and the pattern does not match up, it's going to ruin your whole card, and you spent so much time on it. So just make sure you do a really good job of lining it up. And so now I've got foam layers. It's just so much to mention on this card. I'm going to add some sequins and we're going to be done. Here's what it looks like with all that dimension. Just love it. It's amazing. So let's add some sequins. So all that's left to do this card, I've got the sequins on here. I did 5 sequins, 3 in one little area and a couple spread out, just to kind of emphasize the beauty of these roses. And I added a backer of black. So I'm going to use Altenew Jet Black and put it on the back of this card. I'll show you some final pictures. If you hadn't done it yet, hit the subscribe and like button, and know that everything used in this video will be linked in the description. Those are affiliate links, which means if you click on them, it does not cost you anything, but it does provide a small commission for me, and that really helps support me in this channel. There will also be a blog post about this, and if you haven't yet, consider joining my Facebook group, especially if you're considering becoming a YouTuber. I had so much fun with you guys today. I hope you have a great day. Bye.